Hello, this is Jane Miller, Principal of Jane Miller Associates. Thank you so much for tuning into our webinar today. Isn't it convenient? You can come over here anytime you like, over lunch, watching the football game. Well, maybe we'd better stay focused. I'd like to share with you today some of the development concepts that are behind the personal and professional development that we do at JMA. Now, JMA provides, again, professional and personal development. We do this through face-to-face, hands-on, and online methods. We work with executives and staffs not only to improve skills, but to adjust that all-important attitude. And we do this so you can get things done, and we can do it all in 120 days. In this webinar that you're watching now, we'll talk about these development concepts. We'll look at how we do this. We'll see what it takes to get results. And then I will provide resources for you to use. Here is our website and also my personal email. So please contact me. Let's get started. One of the things we make a distinction of in our business is the differentiation between training and development. We see training as more of teaching someone a new set of skills. That development, on the other hand, is getting them to use these skills more often and more effectively. So some may call us a training company, and that's fine. Really, though, we're in the business of development, personal and professional development. One of the things that we know, however, is in order to really capitalize on all this information that I'm going to share with you in this webinar, or if it's in a lunch and learn or a speech I'm giving to you, it's so critical to keep an open mind. Do you think you have an open mind? Good. Let's put that to the test. Perhaps you've seen this before. And let me just ask, how many squares do you see? If you'd like to pause the recording, go ahead and do so. So it's easy to see 16 squares. Here's 4, 8, 12, 16. However, what about this large square that encaptures them all? Wait, what about 9 squares this way, 9 squares this way, 9 squares? Oh my goodness. Some have counted 46 squares. I'd like you to encourage you to take some time at some point and see if you too can come up with the 46 squares. And really, I use this example because depending who you read, the average person uses somewhere between 3 and 25% of their potential. Less than a quarter of their talents and abilities. Just like the squares, at first glance, perhaps we only saw 16 squares. So if you're running a business or your company, your sales territory, or your department based on only 16 squares instead of the 17 that you see right away, instead of the 46 that may actually exist, how much business, how much growth are you leaving on the table every day? Let's try another exercise. You may have seen the 9-dot exercise before. Every time I come back to it, though, I have to think, how do you do this? So what I'd ask you to do is, without removing your pen, if you transferred this to a piece of paper or printed it, draw 4 lines that connect all the dots. Again, you can't lift your pen or your finger from the screen, and you need to connect all the dots. So The challenge is we have certain assumptions about this particular problem. For those of you who have done this before, try adding another row of dots and then use 5 lines to connect them. The idea here is, of course, here we start 1, 2, 3, 4. And again, the idea being you need to go outside the box in order to connect all of the lines. And it's really the same as the tapping into those and using more of the 46 squares that are available to us. We really have to challenge the assumptions we're making, because oftentimes we do operate inside a box of our own making and then wonder why it's so darn difficult when all we have to do is step outside the line a little bit, or just step back and think more creatively in terms of how to solve problems. You know, it would be neat to be able to point to each other and say, well, you're using 70% of your potential and you're only using 60%. We can't do that, can we? Because potential is exponential. It just never ends. But I do believe in a huge issue. And the issue being, people, me included, don't use the potential that they have. I do work on it very much. But here's an exercise to think about the potential that you use and what it can do for you. So look at these personal and professional wheels with me. In the center of the personal wheel, for example, the very center, you might think of that as using 0% of your potential on a day-to-day basis. And outside would be 100% use of your potential. So the thing to do is to consider just how much of each pieces of the wheel you're using on a day-to-day basis. For example, things are going real great in the family, and I might shade almost till the end of this piece. Physically, perhaps I've been doing a good job with my walking and exercise, and I can shade just about 75% of that piece. Well, maybe in the financial and career I've been spending a little too much, so maybe I can only shade a little bit here. Then you might do the same thing on the professional side. Are you using all the potential in your sales skills? What about time management? How effective are we there at using the whole piece of the pie, or our potential in each piece? So once you shade these in, and then let's say you strip away the outside and see what's left, as far as being a wheel, how would this thing roll? I bet it's probably pretty jagged. And further, how do these two, personal and professional, mesh together? So these areas that you may have shaded in more than 50% may indicate that these are areas of fulfillment and pleasure in your life. Those areas that you shaded less than 50% may indicate areas of pain or dissatisfaction, and this paints a picture really of our self-image. We've kind of defined who we are versus who you believe you have the capability to become. Now, if you could find a way to use a higher percentage of all of your potential, as you just defined in looking at these life goal wheels, what would it do for you? Well, in other words, what difference would I see in you if you began to use more of your potential? In order for all of us to become what we're capable of becoming and succeed on our terms, really there's 3 factors involved. One is attitude development. Well, that sounds like motherhood, America, and apple pie. Another is interpersonal skills. And the third is goal achievement. So let's look at each one so that you can see what we're talking about and how they're related to each other. We begin then by dealing with attitudes. And in all of my processes, whether it's a day or 120 days, we work a lot on attitude development. But let's talk about attitude and get on the same kind of definition of this thing. When we talk about attitudes, we might say they are feelings or outlooks. Really, they are internal to us. They're different from an opinion because while our opinions may change relatively rapidly from day to day or even week to week, our attitudes tend to be a little more stable, a little more fixed. If you've looked at the webinar Thoughts to Action, we talk a lot about attitudes. When we talk about personality, we say it's an outer expression of those inner attitudes. Well, when people come in contact with us, they're responding to our personality, which is really an outgrowth of the attitude. Well, let's look at this. Say you're a manager and you have 6 people reporting to you. You see that there's definitely a communication problem, but you also think that the 6 people you're working with are the biggest jerks that ever walked the face of the earth. Now, you could read 100 books on improving your communication skills and never solve the problem, right? Right, because your attitude is getting in the way. When we define success, we like to keep it really simple. We say that success is the continuous achievement of our own predetermined goals. Again, success is the continuous achievement of our own predetermined goals. What this might mean is if we're not as successful as we want to be or think we should be, then we have to ask ourselves, what parts of my personality are taking me closer to success, and what parts are taking me further away? We look at our attitudes and ask ourselves, which of my attitudes towards myself, my line of work, my company, my customers, are my own? The other thing to recognize is attitudes, as shown here, are really habits of thought. I'd really like to point out that the world operates based on stimulus and response, not stimulus thought response. Let me give you an example. Let's say you're driving down a 4-lane highway and it's a wonderfully warm and sunny day, and you have your windows down and you have your CD stereo playing your favorite music, and you're not really in a particular hurry. Now you're cruising along 45, 50 miles an hour. But as you round the curve, you see a police car sitting on the side of the road. What happens to your right foot? Now, intellectually, in your mind, you know you weren't speeding. But because of our basic attitudes about getting tickets, like the embarrassment of sitting on the side of the road while people pass by and gawk at you, it's almost like our right foot developed a mind of its own. So again, rather than stimulus thought response, it's really a stimulus response world. Really what this all means is there's a direct link between the way we think and the way we behave. How does this come to be in the animal kingdom? Here's a couple of great thoughts on that. Do you know how they train an elephant? They take the elephant when it's just a baby. They tie 4 chains around his legs, and the poor little baby elephant strains and strains and pulls, but he just can't break free. Eventually, the elephant gives up, and at that point, you can take off the chains and put just a little piece of rope around just one leg of the elephant, put it to a stake in the ground, and because the elephant learned that there's no point in struggling, one thin little piece of rope keeps this huge elephant within a very confined area. Fleas are the same way. Wouldn't it be interesting to take your dog or cat that has fleas and try this? But if you wanted to train fleas, you could put them in a jar with a lid, and the fleas will continue to jump up and jump up and jump up, and they'll stay exactly where you want them once you take the lid off, because they've learned that it's not going to help to jump any longer. Do you know how to boil a frog? Well, we would never want to do that. However, if you took a frog and put it in some cool water and turned on the heat, that frog will literally boil to death before it would jump out. Now, on the other hand, if you take a frog and throw it into a pot of boiling water, talk about the instant use of potential. That frog will jump about 6 feet. That's a good example of how we get used to something. How does this affect us, though, as humans? If behavior is based on attitudes, then, in order for us to stop wasting all this potential, we got to begin by dealing with the thought processes that create the behavior. Based on who we read, it's estimated that up to 95% of our basic personality is formed before the age of 5. That means in order to understand how you're behaving today, we have to go back to that very early period. Now, we're not going to try and fix things here, but wouldn't you agree that probably the first couple words an infant understands are mommy, daddy, and no? Would you agree that most of our basic attitudes are likely more negative than positive? Would you agree that people tend to think more often about what's going wrong, how they're going to fail, rather than what's right and their potential for success? Well, let's look at it logically. If a baby goes to touch the stove, the parent says what? Don't touch. If the baby goes to write on the wall, don't write on the wall. As the child grows older and more sophisticated, so do the don'ts. And then we add consequences. Don't touch the stove or you'll get burned. Don't write on the wall, you'll make your dad mad. As the child gets older, the classic truisms, the axioms are taught to this child. Just as a test, finish off what I start. Don't bite off more than you can chew. Children should be seen and not. Don't go where you're not. Don't speak unless you're. Don't talk to. Okay, so quickly give me a positive statement that you heard frequently when you were a young child. True, nowadays we do hear the term good job quite often. Not when I was growing up. I'm simply saying that when we look at the majority of things that we were exposed to during our early years, a great majority were negative, and that's not to say that we had bad parents. It's just that they were keeping us safe and trying to teach us structure and order. But it does point to the fact that while we were developing these basic attitudes so young in life, many of them are easier to be negative than positive. You may feel that your attitudes are pretty good, and that might be true. And the fact remains that the heavy influence of those early years had a definite effect on our attitudes. Did anyone lately ever turn to you and say, okay, you're old enough now, you can talk to strangers? Or did anyone ever say to you, it's about time you try to bite off more than you can chew? Or how about, you can now be heard, not just seen? In sales, one of the biggest problems we come across is called call reluctance. I even have an ebook on this subject. It's not unusual for young people who have everything going for them, intelligence, a good appearance, college degree, to have picking up the phone and calling strangers their hugest, biggest obstacle. they try and they pick up the phone, and well, their tongue might as well be 4 inches thick and the phone weighs 5,000 pounds. It's just so tough. Can you think of worse advice than don't go where you're not wanted? Don't talk to strangers for a salesperson? We have to make sure that the attitudes we're carrying with us are actually taking us closer to our goals and not further away. With all this negative stuff and of this early conditioning, remember the statement, attitudes are developed, negative or positive, therefore they can be changed. William James, the father of American psychology, said, "The greatest discovery of our generation is that human beings, by changing the inner attitudes of their mind, can change the outer aspects of their lives." You can change attitudes. It must be a conscious attempt. Unless you make that attempt, because of this early negative influence in your stages of your life, your basic thought process can tend to be negative. Let's look at how we develop attitudes. As far as we know, there's really 3 ways to develop attitudes. The first is by impact, the second is by discovery, and the third one is by spaced repetition. Okay, let me give you 2 examples of impact, one negative, one positive. The first is a guy has, let's say, there's a commercial on TV right now. He has a massive coronary. And he says, that's it. It's time for me to spend more time with my family and take good care of my health. That's impact. A negative one. Positive impact. Let's say you hear an incredibly powerful speaker and your whole life improves, your marriage improves, your kids get better grades, and your dog doesn't even have fleas anymore. It's miraculous. It's that aha moment. The problem with it is it's really hard to replicate that. In fact, let's just consider that powerful speaker. We've probably all gone to seminars and been like, wow. And then the next day, you're lucky if you recall half of what was said. After 2 days, you might recall 25%. And after 16 days, you may not even recall 2% of the information that you were exposed to. However, if I asked you what significant event happened on September 11, 2001, most people can tell you where they were when they got the news that America was being attacked. That's an example of impact. It happened to you once, but you remember it forever. Again, the next way adults learn is through that aha. Something like that, I could have had a V8. Suddenly we see something different than we did before. And that's positive impact. But the third way that adults learn, and the same way that these attitudes were developed over time, is spaced repetition. It's estimated that if we expose you to the same concept or idea 6 times over the course of 6 days, you'll retain 62% of it. And you'll retain it for 15 years. So what we're talking about here is long-term development, not just short-term training. That's where the 120 days idea comes in. Let me give you a little test of multiplication. How much is 4 times 2? 8 times 4? 6 times 11? Good work. Now how much is 14 times 17? Oof, we didn't go up to the 14 times tables, did we now? I use this example because how long has it been since you studied the multiplication tables, but you still remember them up to 10s or 12s? You learn the multiplication tables through repetition. Let me give you another example of the power of spaced repetition. Here's some jingles. Finish them, if you will. 2 all-beef patties, special sauce. Lettuce, cheese, pickles, onions on a sesame seed bun. Correct? How many of you made a conscious attempt then to learn the McDonald's, what they put on their Big Mac? We didn't. We were just exposed to it. And what company uses the saying, just do it? Nike, of course. Now finish these statements. You're in good hands with always low prices, always have it your way. And how about quality is job one? The power of repetition is tremendous. Most importantly, it's not a conscious kind of retention, but when it's stimulated, you respond almost automatically with the endings. The same thing is true with our attitudes. Not only can we develop attitudes that way, but we can develop skills. Now, if we were to graph people or management skills, look at this chart. On the left is the people issues, and on the right are the technical issues. Would you agree then that on an individual contributor level, 90% of people's success is most likely going to come from their technical knowledge, and only 10% from their management knowledge? In other words, they need to get along with people in front of them and behind them as an individual contributor. What happens, though, when the folks become a supervisor and move into management? Now, half their job becomes about running other people. They still need the technical knowledge, but they're getting paid to get results from other people. And as you move up through middle management, more and more of their job is happening through people management and less through technical. The real question is, though, how do we go about getting this management knowledge? In most organizations, would you agree that they tend to promote from within and take people from the individual contributor level down here where they have great technical knowledge and move them up through to supervisory? So where do they get this other 40% of this people skills they need to succeed? The transition between being an individual contributor and a supervisor could sound like this. You get called in the office on a Thursday afternoon and they tell you you're going to be named a supervisor on Monday. Now, what could be the cost in real dollars of grievances, employee complaints, and dissatisfaction because we haven't taken the time to really give people the training and development they need in order to succeed in their new roles? I'm often asked the question, how can I make more money? The answer is really simple. Become worth more. Let me ask you, what are you doing to become worth more tomorrow than you were yesterday? If your answer is nothing, why not? Oftentimes we'll hear someone say, well, let them give me a raise and then they'll see really what I can do. How about you go home tonight and stand in front of the fireplace and say to it, give me some heat first and then I'll add the wood. Got to put something in before you get something out. Let's talk just a little bit about goal setting. People are basically goal directed. For example, most people prepare a shopping list before they go shopping because it's more effective. Most people are very careful to plan out their vacations in order to, maximize the week they have off. Really, people end up spending more time planning 2 weeks of vacation a year than they do the whole rest of their lives. Our approach to goal achievement then involves both personal and organizational goal setting. You remember the wheels that we had. We asked people who have written in specific goals what their goals revolve around. What do you think they said? Over 80% said money. Now, we all know people who are workaholics, but what happens to their mental development, social life, their family? We encourage you to take a look at all of the aspects of your life, not just money. We try to present a triple win between the organization and the people within it. On the professional side, we ask you to evaluate and set goals on how you manage people, how you manage your time, and what it means for you to be personally productive in your position and not just a busy person. Far too many people confuse motion with progress. And then on the personal side, we suggest that you look at 6 areas: financial and career, family, mental, social, physical and ethics, and beliefs. The whole idea is that as you become even more competent professionally, the organization is going to get better results. So in turn, that gives the organization the money to increase your compensation, your benefits, promotions, and as your personal compensation is increasing, then you will have the financial wherewithal to satisfy more and more of your personal goals and objectives. So really all this personal and professional development does have a bottom line to it as well, as long as we work it from the inside out. Really, it's a simple, what's in it for me question that we're able to answer for both the company and its people. So again, attitude development gets you to think about your potential. This development can directly affect our confidence, learning how to communicate, making decisions, managing, and then of course the goal setting we use as a tool to force you to use that attitude. We get you to put together a plan and a roadmap to get the results that you want to get. So again, our how-tos are working on attitude, improving some skills and knowledge where you need those, and with the goal setting and goal achievement, it moves to positive behavior change. Because that's what we want. We don't just want to change, we want a positive behavior change. And our processes do include a follow-along. Most people, again, will say, boy, I went to that training, but it just fizzles away after a while. And here at Jane Miller Associates, after these processes, we do offer a follow-along. And again, that can be face-to-face with some coaching. It can be hands-on with audio and text that are very good for repetitive learning. And also online, just like this webinar. When we talk about getting results, what are the results that you're looking for? Many times we'll start with a SWOT analysis, so strengths and weaknesses, opportunities and threats. Or simply asking the question, what's keeping you up at night? What is keeping you from reaching the results that you need to achieve? And our solutions lie, again, in our professional and personal development series. We work with individuals and we work with teams. We use an In 120 Days program so that there's a tangible beginning and end within the results you're looking to get. We add along, follow along, and accountability coaching. I always say, would you like a big stick or a carrot with that? Along the right-hand side here, you can see some of the skill-based processes that we do offer. Within all of these, attitude and thought to action are vitally important and something we include anytime we're working with people. Each one of these areas also has text and audio programs that people can use to study on their own. Some of our resources. Please visit our website, in120days.com, to find many of these resources. JMA also offers Lunch and Learns. We'll just take 20 minutes to kind of give you a wrap-up or a summary of thought to action, getting results, attitude, whatever you need. We provide speakers for speaking events, for your annual meeting or retreat. Here's a good idea to use, a vendor program. If your company typically brings in vendors to schmooze with them or to show them the new products and services, why not have us in to do 20 minutes at the end to give them an attitude and a motivation boost? We provide coaching for executives and their teams, and individuals as well. You can find some of our seminars and workshops out in the community at local chambers and associations. We also offer in-house programs and products for self-study. Again, I so appreciate you letting me into your computer today. I thank you for taking the time to focus. Here's our contact information. We look forward to hearing from you. Thank you.